do you look up? Well, let's rewind to Maryland. What was the first narrative box since Nebraska continues to check them off? What's the first narrative box that made your headlines that Nebraska checked off in College Park?
Yeah, you don't want to be there because it's stressful where you have to have the drive where you're behind. But we talk about it all off season, and we say it casually, like in the spring or summer, like, oh, there's gonna be that moment where they're down 3 or 4 points, 4 minutes left, and can they produce? And you guys know the charts that are fairly out there from the last 10 years or whatever, and it's a long list of really bad drives where Nebraska turns the ball over half the time. Not attached to these guys on this roster at all, but you guys know how it works here. You kind of bear a little of that on your back until you get past it. And so the fact that they had that possession where Dylan was able to shake off some troubling throws earlier in the game and make 3 or 4 of the best plays he did all day. And then, Dane Key kind of showing why he came to Nebraska and why Nebraska wanted him here on that last catch. I thought that was it. Just that game-winning drive that off a box that goes back like 10, 15 years. I guess Tanner Lee had one against Purdue in 2017 when it felt like Mike Riley was already a lame duck. So this one had a lot more meaning.
So, BC, more important to you, was it the defensive drive we saw against Cincinnati where it kind of bucked the narrative of, hey, Nebraska will be in it, they'll have the lead, they'll be ready to go, and they'll defense have been great all game, and then they let that last drive come through, which we've seen quite a bit over the last few years, or the one we saw against Maryland where, hey, Nebraska's got the ball with a chance to go win the game, and they go do it?
Probably the one against Maryland will be the thing that jumps out more to people because of what I just said, but make no mistake. I mean, the defense has to feel confident or get a boost from the fact that they've had 2 games now this season where they've stopped someone in the 2-minute drill to close the deal. And yes, the one at Cincy got a little dicey with them getting it to about the 35 or whatever, but they made the play, and it's the play that people have been asking for them to make in that situation. And so my point is that we can't talk about it when we're sitting back by the pool comfortably, like there's going to be these moments and then dismiss them when the moments actually arrive and you get yourself in those situations and guys deliver, even if there were some things that you want to improve on the road that got you there. So that's what it impresses me is this team am starting to buy into, does not panic at all or get caught up in what happened before them. And that's a big thing because that has been a problem with this program. And sometimes they've gotten lost, I think, to the narratives of seasons past, and that's attached to them. And I think this team's doing a nice job at trying to set their own story.
So, you know what's interesting? If speaking of like setting their own story and who are they, who in the world is this Minnesota team when you look at them that's kind of throwing the ball all around the yard? They haven't really established a ground game. Like, I did like Butler's comments. Well, I mean,
I did too.
why wouldn't you try to run it at us? I would. Like, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they like their young quarterback, and also I think, frankly, their O-line has struggled a little bit. And I know you're talking to Ryan Burns later on your show. He's a great guy to have because he knows that team inside and out, can speak to them as well as anybody in that market, and so he can give the real details on where they're scuffling and all that. But I think up front they maybe haven't been as solid as they have past years. But I like too what Butler said. Like, yeah, I know what they look like on paper. We respect the young quarterback and what he can do, but they're going to try to run it, we think. And why would you not? I like that. Maybe he's trying to coax him into something a little bit there. I don't know if they play mind games like that in the press conferences, but that's the test that this defense has to continue to answer. They did it really well against Michigan State, where you felt like they took a step forward with the run defense and had a handle on it. And that allowed them to get after the quarterback the way they did and hit him as much as they did. And so that's the first thing this Friday is you got to take away that run, even if they're not doing it quite as much, and get that young guy in some 3rd and 7s. And as Butler said, you got to hit him. It can't just be the PFF pressures talk on the day after. It's got to be actual hits on the quarterback that gets in his mind, forces him to want to just get happy feet, throw that ball out early. That's what Aiden Chiles sort of did in that game. And you got to try to replicate that.
BC, as you're looking at Drake Lindsay and you go, okay, you've got a guy that is maybe pretty talented, can make some throws, has been a little up and down this year. But I think the big thing that is, I think the first power conference opponent that doesn't have what I would call a mobile quarterback and in any sense. How much does that change how you view this matchup versus just the overall kind of talent ability of Minnesota versus Nebraska?
Yeah, I think it's a definite plus for Nebraska. I mean, there's no question that the guys who could move a little bit more have been problems. That's the way it is for everybody, though. I mean, sometimes we act like that's just a Nebraska problem, trying to get a handle on a QB who can stretch his legs on a 3rd and 5. And I'm not saying Drake Lindsay couldn't do that too. So you got to always respect that. But that does take a dimension out of it that I think is very useful to a defense. And I think John Butler is going to explore like what's worked and what didn't last week, even though it's a different quarterback, about getting to the QB. Like he said, we came out, played more zone in that game and maybe played too much of it, honestly. And when he looked back at the tape. And so, he had that quote about you kind of had to have the screw it, mentality there. Let's get after him at the end. And, to Nebraska's credit, on the last series against Maryland, like those last 6 plays, there was like 4 plays where they got around him pretty well. And I do think forced him to be uncomfortable. And honestly, I know on the TV copy, Maryland had the guy wide open, but the reason he didn't see it is because a credit to the pressure was starting to get there on that last series. And I think it did get in his head a little bit. So hopefully they can sort of pick up where they left off, because they actually did play pretty good defense after the first drive of the second half. They really finished the game strong.
BC, what do you make of it? It's kind of interesting where you don't want to get in the habit of playing this way, and maybe the all white uniforms will be the next box they check off. But you go, it's well documented, right? You go -3 in turnovers, twice the penalties that you averaged. Your 3rd down stop rate, which was one of the tops in the country. You allowed Maryland to go 7 of 15. They bucked a lot of trends and still got a W. How do you listen? You don't want to make a habit of that, but there is growth in there too, right? What's the balance for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably awesome for a coach when you can go back and be like, look at all the areas we didn't hit our goals for this game, but you guys still found a way to dig deep and get it done. But obviously the 3rd down, you want to see sharpen up. I think Maryland was 7 of 12 going into the 4th quarter. I get choked up emotional talking about it. It was so tough. But I like the fact that when everything was against them in that game, and it was that 3rd and 2 to start the 4th quarter, and it felt like Maryland was leaning on them, they bucked up and they came out of that huddle, and they really kind of put it on Maryland in the 4th quarter on defense when you look at what happened from that point forward. And that is growth, because there are so many moments where in the past that would have been a game where Maryland just keeps rolling downhill. They go up 2 touchdowns and it's sort of a lost cause. Instead, you get the 4-yard TFL, which, by the way, I think might be the play of this season for Nebraska. I just thought it kept that door open, like they can come back and win this thing. It was a nice, play by one of the guys you brought in to make plays like that. Now, the next step you want to see from this team, and I love your guys' radio broadcast, Damon, and it was that drive when it was 24-14, and Nebraska has with 4 minutes left in the second quarter. It's the step on the throat drive, and I feel like that's maybe just the missing ingredient where you want to see this team take a step if they get that opportunity Friday. If you're up 7 or 10 and you have that possession where you don't waste it, or give it right back, and suddenly you're in a 3-point game and it's going to go to the last 2 minutes. I understand there's going to be ebbs and flows, but you'd like to see a game or two going forward where Nebraska in that moment sort of plays like they did in the fourth quarter, and they bring it to the late second, early third quarter.
BC, as you're looking ahead to Minnesota this week, is there what? I think it was Butler talked about it. Well, they're on a short week too. It's not like they're coming off a bye or anything. I guess what level of concern does the short week hold for you?
I don't think it brings much. And I don't think all the whatever's out there speculative wise brings much concern. I think nobody's probably better at talking to his team than Matt Rhule in an honest fashion about this is what it is. Let's go. I'm rocking with you guys. And I think in their heads, they've prepared for a while for this stretch in the season. I think it would be more difficult, honestly, if you had lost a heartbreaker on Saturday and you had to get back up Sunday morning and go do it. I know guys are resilient, but that would have seemed tough. So the fact that you sort of had that wind in your sails, you probably bounced in a little bit on Sunday, feeling like, all right, that was a pretty nice win on the road. Did some things we haven't always done in situations like that. So I just don't think it's going to be a big issue. I mean, it's a 7 p.m. kickoff. It's about a 12-hour difference from when you normally kick off. I know you don't get that extra night's sleep, but I think the coaches, you can tell they put it ahead. Like, this isn't that much different than if we were kicking off early Saturday. Let's just go. Let's not have it be a part of the conversation.
When you're looking at where you think Minnesota is versus where Nebraska is in terms of like their psyche, does the way the game starts matter to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think Nebraska has a chance to against certain teams on the schedule, and Minnesota would be one of them, where I feel like the Huskers have a slight edge. Maybe deep down, Minnesota knows that, where if Nebraska could put it in their head right away, it's going to be a tough night for you. We did come to play. We've got something going this year. And then build that opportunity I was talking about where you're up 7 or whatever in the second quarter, and you have that drive where you really get a chance to sort of stamp them out a little bit. And, I'm sure it'll be a lively enough crowd, but there'll be a good number of Nebraska fans there too. And it can be that moment where you could try to, like, early on, establish that you're going to take over the stadium a little bit too. Like, I think that's a big part of it. Like, you have the chance early in the game to not let the crowd be as much of a factor as certainly they were 2 years ago. I understand that was a different circumstance. It was the first game of the year. Maybe there was a little more juice, but I think there'll be juice there Friday night. And I think Nebraska will be better prepared for it. As Matt Rhule has, documented, they probably were a little underprepared for what was going to await them in that one.
BC, I'm assuming you're expecting a big Nebraska contingent up there on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like a heavy travel game. It's a easy trip, the mall, all that stuff. So I don't know, 15, 20,000. That wouldn't surprise me. I was a little bit actually surprised, and I know this fan base. I grew up here, by how well represented they were at Maryland. So
I was too. I thought that I did not expect that at all.
That didn't seem like a game to me where it would be like, because it's harder to get to. You thought maybe a few thousand and there it goes, but no, they had an impact, and that's a big deal on the road. There's something that's hard to explain to people if they've never gone on a Husker road trip. Like the fan base is like so in it with the team. Like they almost feel like they're the left guard in the game. Like I have a say in this matter when you've spent your money to go watch them, and there is a very real connection. And I think that was a big part of the fourth quarter Saturday. And so that's why I say, to Damon's question, that's the part where I think it's big to jump out early, is because you get that crowd sort of like feeling like, let's make this a home game sort of thing.
I wonder if it'll be that kind of environment, because I always thought, like, quietly, if you talk about fan bases and teams that don't like Nebraska, I feel Minnesota is grossly underappreciated in that respect. I don't think they like Nebraska at all. Which
they don't. You know what it goes back to?
Knock them for, but we act as though, like, I mean, you have to match their energy, which is, it's one of disdain.
Yeah, I agree with you, Damon. That goes back to 84-13. There's people of a certain age there that 1983, when Nebraska laid it on them 84-13. And by the way, Nebraska did not run up the score in that game. If you go back and watch it, Minnesota was just horrible. But like there's writers up there that are older and stuff that like they still remember that game and have like a certain venom about Nebraska for like just running up and down the field and sort of how that happened. So that's real. I think that's carried over to their younger generations for somehow, some way. And also I think there's a feeling, I think Burns would probably tell you this, up there, they kind of always look at Nebraska as getting the benefit of the doubt in the offseason from people more than they think Nebraska should. And in some years that has been true. And so I think that all kind of combines to what you're saying.
BC, it does. So I was not expecting you to bust out the 84-13 because I hadn't even thought about that. But I've always sort of assumed, and this is how I feel at least, I find myself, even though I know they've been better than Nebraska, even though I know that they've beaten Nebraska for 5 straight years, I find myself always being incredibly dismissive and disrespectful of Minnesota. Just no matter, like, there's almost nothing they can do where I'll be like, oh, that's a good football team. Like, I can get there with Iowa. I can get there with Illinois. We got there with Wisconsin. I've gotten there with almost everybody else. But I almost put Minnesota in, like, Purdue category in terms of mentally being able to flip the switch of like, no, this is a good football team. Yeah. And I always assumed that was I just felt like Minnesota maybe could pick up on that.
That's probably part of it. I mean, that does happen everywhere with like, if a place is thought of as more of a blue blood football program, I think it's always harder for that fan base, even if they've struggled for a while, to accept certain teams are actually like in that category or even above them sometimes. And that does get under the other side's skin. I mean, we could say the same thing about Nebraska basketball. They've went to Indiana. They've kind of owned Indiana in recent years, and Indiana after a hoops loss to Nebraska will always act like, they lost to a high school JV team or something. That's just like sort of the mentality that's baked in. So yeah, I think you guys are on the nail though, that there is a little bit of animosity that you wouldn't necessarily expect on the surface between the two sides. But, Nebraska's got to go there. This is another chance to check a box. A team that's beat you 5 times in a row. Again, that's not on you, but that stuff adds up, and it's a graphic on a TV screen every year. Put an end to it, and I also like there's no program that has taken a trampoline off of Nebraska's back more than Minnesota and PJ Fleck. Like, I mean, you talk about like, look at some of their wins when they've come from Minnesota on their schedule. In certain seasons, they've been in a precarious spot, like where their season could go either way. And it's lifted them to be that 7-8 kind of win team. And it ends up being a successful year for them. Nebraska obviously needs to win for itself, but needs to start taking some of these games and these regional matchups to not elevate, teams that are a couple states over or your border rival in Iowa. They just have, and they got to put an end to it.
Yeah, I go back to there's plenty, right, but between the fan bases and the no sloganeering, and PJ Fleck said he knew what Nebraska was going to do, and it was very easy because. I mean, you
talent versus culture? That was the thing, right?
Yeah. Do you remember when PJ Fleck, after they beat Nebraska, he said, just predictable, like we knew what they were going to do and how they were going to line up, and the talent versus culture. They're not a big sloganeering group. Like there's a ton in there, and I just think, like whenever Minnesota sees Nebraska coming, I get the sense that Minnesota thinks. Get right game. Like,
yeah, they do.
I just think that's how they think.
And Nebraska's let them have the opportunity.
Minnesota was the place with the sweaters, and they were too cold, and people didn't like how they wore
the hoodies.
Like there's
the hoodie game. Yeah,
there's a ton of these narratives that I think have fueled.
Yeah, the nonsensical stuff.
That had fueled the disdain.
Oh yeah, and people who act like, oh, Nebraska's better than that. I'm. You know what? I've been up in that press box too many times and seen some ugly Nebraska performances, and every year is different, but sometimes you just get that vibes of a place where it hasn't been comfortable here before, and you got to have that team that breaks through and changes that thought process. The good thing is some of these guys weren't even involved in if they were only one game, the one 2 years ago. But I can think of like the game where Bill Moose yelled, "Oh no," like in the press box, and it was in a cartoon, and stuff. The 54-21 game, that was one of the worst Husker games I ever saw. 34-7. There were some doozies up there. And so
we got served the mystery meat and mashed potatoes in the summer for that.
Yeah, they do have the bust out the dilly bars, which is nice. They got a nice connection with Dairy Queen or something going, so that's good. But I have a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when I'm up in that box because it's been some tough experiences. So that's it. I gotta shake from my mental mind up there from what I've seen from Nebraska football, including Jacques Quezient slipping on the 1 yard line. I mean, there's all sorts of things you could go through.
Well, I went to the wrong stadium, so I'm traumatized. I'm just saying. They're both banks.
Can you take me to the stadium named after a bank? Sure. BC, so how do you think this one goes?
I mean, I think Nebraska, I like this team's like mindset that they are like in the present and not lost in the sauce with stuff I talk about, like what happened with Jacques Quezient, that none of those kids care about that. And I do think there has been a comfort that's starting to build in the fourth quarter. Like, we made a play this week, we're gonna make another play next week. That sort of builds. And the problem in past seasons is Nebraska hasn't had that happen early where you can kind of stack on top of it, and they have this year. So that's a really golden thing to value, that you actually do have those experiences in your back pocket. You've been there, and now take advantage when they come up again and expected to get it done. Well, maybe it's the other side now that's sort of expecting the other shoe to drop. And that's the way you have to look at it. So I think Nebraska will win, and I think the spread 8-9 is about right.
So, Coach Butler last week talked about packing your defense to go on the road. And he also alluded to, why not run it at us? What do you think their mindset is coming into this one? You don't want them chasing ghosts, but they do appear to be cognizant. And it's kind of like this, BC. When Maryland came out and got in like 3 tights, now they didn't stay with it as long as I thought they should have, but I mean, it's little things like that I think help prepare Nebraska for the next week, right? Like any opponent's capable of doing something they haven't done because they watch tape too.
Yeah, I'm always really encouraged when a team is having what seems like it could be a bad day at the office, with maybe Maryland has thrown something at you didn't expect, and it's 24. You've already given up 24 points like early third quarter, and it's seeming like one of those days, and you're able to change up on the sideline, and there's an understanding between what the coaches want out of you. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more of this, maybe drop this, and then you go out and you actually execute it on the fly. That's always impressive to me. And that, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from that game, is that that's really what they did on defense. And I didn't initially realize how well they played on defense like the last quarter and a half until like the next morning, honestly, because you get caught up in all these other things. And then you sort of revisit some of the series they had. Like, Nebraska adjusted pretty well, and they met the moment on that side of the ball after a tough start. So you don't want the beginning to be like it was, but there are going to be games where that happens. And can you be a team that actually on the fly finds an answer and then actually executes that answer you think will work? And I thought they did that.
That's our guy, Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, appreciate the conversation as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker247.